Welcome to Funnel Reboot, the podcast that shares ideas on how to upgrade your lead generation. Here is your host, Glenn Schmeltzley.
So today we're going to talk about how video can be used for digital marketing. And I'm going to talk about how we as marketers should approach the video creation process. There are a lot of different formats that a marketer has in their wheelhouse today. We've all started likely with writing, but then images and graphic design came along. And by no means last and least is video. Video has come on, of course, in a very big way. All the social platforms are supporting it. And there's, of course, the world's second largest search engine called YouTube, which also is a completely video-based platform. So I have to admit, though, from an inside standpoint, marketers like me can be reticent to use video because we can be a little intimidated by what it takes to produce something in this format. So I wanted to talk to somebody who has a great deal of experience in creating videos and can give us some insight and maybe lessen that intimidation. So Casey Lee is the founder and CEO of ByteSite. They are a app development and video production company here in Ottawa. And I asked Casey to come on and help me today to tell me how video can be used and why it's such a good format for creating content. Hey, Casey.
Hey, Glenn. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, no problem. So let's jump in and maybe you can tell me, make the case for video. Why do you think it's such a good format for explaining what our story is?
Yeah, so I think the thing that video has, and it's a little bit hard to explain at first, but then when you kind of analyze it, it kind of makes sense that, people seem to enjoy watching videos sometimes more than, say, reading a blog post or reading a newsletter or whatever. And I think one of the big advantages to video is that for a lot of people, myself included, it's a very passive activity. I didn't grow up reading a lot outside of school. I read books in school and that was it. I was not a leisure reader. So I think for a lot of people, it just doesn't feel like work. Like if you want to learn something, if you want to educate yourself on something, I guess those are the same thing, but or be entertained, watching video is a very passive activity, right?
Yeah.
But the other aspect of video that I think a lot of people don't think about is it's a very rich medium in the sense that it communicates a lot more than what the people are saying on the video, right? Let's say like you write a blog post, you may write an article, the 5 best tips to marketing or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And if you're a really good writer, you will get across a lot more than just what the words are saying. You will get across your tone, you'll get across the emotion behind it, all that stuff like that. If you're a really good writer. If you're not, a lot of that stuff may get lost and you can lose some of the power of that. Whereas video, if you're kind of good in front of camera, a lot of that stuff will come out without you even thinking, right? I think one of the best things is that about video, let's say you're trying to market your company, right? I think a lot of times people don't realize the power of just who they are as people, right? Like I think one of the reasons people like working with ByteSite is because we're a bunch of nice people. We're nice, approachable people. Yeah. And that might not come across in a blog post, right? If you put us on video, you start to see, oh, this seems like a friendly guy that I wouldn't mind talking to, right? So
yes,
that's just one of the aspects that makes video so rich, is that all these other nuances get communicated through video, which I think is a really big thing that you might lose in other mediums. So.
Yeah, and I remember hearing that the majority of what is communicated whenever people are seeing each other is nonverbal.
Yeah, totally, right?
So that context, as you say, just rolls along with the message. It kind of makes the message more potent.
Yeah, exactly, right? I mean, sometimes like me on a video saying, oh, and this third point is crucial, or it's really important. Like the way I deliver that may have a lot more impact than the written word, right? Or
yes,
or a graphic or whatever, right? So I think there's a lot of things that come across in video that are, I wouldn't say are impossible to do in other mediums, just a lot harder to do in other mediums.
Yeah, gotcha. There are many facets to it, and I want to first frame what we're going to talk about by what we're not going to cover, because once a video is produced, there's a whole other set of issues that you have to look at, like where to place it, the distribution, We're going to focus in another podcast episode about all of that comes. But for the time where we're going to focus on just what we're creating, I want to get your take on how to think of when something should be a video and when something shouldn't. There's a video producer named Ethan Butte, and he said it just completely drives him bonkers when he hears somebody say, we need a video strategy. This has probably rankled you too. There's really no way to answer that question successfully because video isn't a strategy by itself. It's just a medium. So yet, there still have to be some basic questions that help mere mortals like me understand if I've got some information. Maybe some things lend themselves a little bit more to video, and maybe there are other things that lend themselves a little bit less to video. For example, I haven't seen a insurance company that's put the fine print of their policies in video, right? But other things they will. So maybe you can just help me. And you've heard, I'm sure, a lot of ideas, and you've probably in your head said, this is going to work, but that's not going to work. What are you using when you judge those types of things that we can maybe help to use?
Yeah, no, totally. I think the thing about, I'd be lying if I said I heard that a lot where companies come to us and say like, oh, we're trying to execute our video strategy, or we need a video strategy. I haven't come across that, but I definitely hear rumblings of that from other people. And I 100% agree that doesn't really make a lot of sense on the surface. I think it really is, again, video is a medium, right? So it's kind of like you have a marketing strategy, and if it lends itself well to video or blog posts or newsletters or whatever, then you choose those appropriately. So I definitely agree with that sentiment that you shouldn't be attacking it like we need a video strategy. I think there are some companies where it kind of makes sense, but that's more on the larger scale. I mean, if you're like a huge company and you are trying to, and your marketing strategy encompasses attacking everybody on every medium because you want to maximize how much you're getting, then in that case, you may split up, your different media into different, strategies. But very few of us are in that camp. Very few of us have unlimited resource, or no one has unlimited resource, but very few of us have a lot of resources to do that level. So I think we're talking more about, again, kind of small, medium business, or people who are just starting to figure out their marketing strategy and figuring out what's suitable for video or not. And that is a tough question to answer in a general context. We joke about, it'd be really funny if these small fine print things are in video, but you know what? I could see that actually being very effective, right? I think what it comes down to is what you kind of touched on in your intro, which is kind of cost-benefit analysis, right? Because you're right, because video can be very expensive and time-consuming, and maybe a big hurdle for a lot of people to get over, right? I mean, if you think about, you have somebody on your staff who can write a decent article, or who can who can create a decent graphic. What is it gonna take for you to experiment to see if that's gonna work? Maybe not that much. Maybe you say, do it for half an hour. But if you say to somebody, can you produce a video? All of a sudden, that might take a week, that might take 2 weeks. And it's hard to get feedback on that. It's hard to experiment with. So you start to ask yourself, well, for that amount of effort, what is our actual return going to look like, right? And so I would say in general, video with the right kind of distribution strategy behind it can be very effective in a lot of different projects. But where I start, and talk about concrete examples, where I start to worry a little bit is when I can't see clear messaging and simple messaging. And I'll tell you why. Video's already hard to make. Video takes a lot of time and effort to make. Yeah. And I will say it's even harder if you're trying to communicate a lot in a video. Your chances of making a video that has a lot of information and is successful are a lot lower than if you're making a short video with a very simple message. So if you're trying to communicate a simple, clear message, which already is a hard exercise to do, I would say that is very suitable for video as a kind of a general rule of thumb. The more complex what you're trying to highlight or what you're trying to communicate is, I would start to worry a little bit if that's your first foray into video.
One of the things that you've kind of talked about without actually saying, but sticks out very clearly to me in video compared to, let's say, content that we write, is the amount of message that you have to say. It starts to translate into minutes and seconds of final product. So I imagine in your world it becomes fairly easy to rate the complexity of how something's going to be in a video by how long it's going to end up being, right?
Yeah.
So, and if that's true, then I love that cost benefit you were talking about, because to me, that starts to come into maybe what we can, as marketers, consider the audience outcome. So let's say that it's that I want to tell people 3 important things about my product, and I'm going to plunk this on the homepage of my website, and the outcome I'm expecting is that people who didn't know us before know what our product does, and hopefully are left with a positive sentiment about it.
Yeah.
Right? And now we can kind of clearly say, well, if we're going to go on for half an hour and everybody can see with a digital video how long it's going to take, we're probably not going to get that audience outcome, because nobody's going to survive through that.
Yes.
But if we make it 2.5 minutes and they look at it and go, I got 2.5 minutes.
Yeah.
And they are going through, they will probably reach that audience outcome, and there very clearly is an ROI there for me to bother making it.
Exactly. I think you nailed it there. I think one thing I did not mention that you just mentioned is that outcome, right? Like that goal that you're going after. You know, if that is kind of set in your head why you're even making this video in the first place, that goes already like a long way to making a successful video. So
excellent. What else do we have to think about? Like, you have gone through this process a whole lot.
Yeah.
You even made a 22-minute video that tells BiteSite's own origin story. So, like, what in the scoping stage of the game do you like to have at least written down? It might not be set in stone, but how do we at least start to get this framed so that we don't run off course when it starts to get into where we're spending money or we're actually getting footage?
Yeah, so we've kind of gone a lot of different directions over the history of BiteSite when it comes to scoping and making sure that projects kind of stay on track. And the very first question when we talk about scoping and all that stuff is really, what budget are you dealing with? Like, so coming to a video production company with just even a rough idea of how much you're comfortable spending, it is a really good idea.
So, and we're going to maybe get a little cosmic here, but I think in some ways we're a little bit coming back to what the central idea is of the video, because these different amounts of, for lack of a better term, I'll call polish, that you would put that make the higher end videos look so much better. I mean, just as a movie watcher, I think to movies like Good Will Hunting or Rocky.
Yeah.
And those are kind of, I guess, the ones that are held out in Hollywood of saying, look, here was a person who didn't have much money at all, but had this super strong idea of what they wanted to get filmed, and against all odds, you know, because the Hollywood machinery just doesn't work for those kind of small budgets.
Yeah.
But they pulled it off.
Yeah.
Because the idea was strong.
Yes.
So I guess you're right. Every company's going to have a different tack on this, but I suppose what we're saying is, if it's going to be towards the lower end of the budget, your idea had better be stronger. It's kind of a proportional relationship.
Yeah. Like, all things being equal, right? Like, if the only thing that's different is the polish, yeah, it's going to, like, feel like a better video. It can, there are things that can be said about your company because you happen to spend more money on the video, right? Like if you were to spend, you know, $20,000 on a 30-second video, and provided, you know, the company doesn't rip you off, you play that video, there will be an impression. There will be like, wow, this company must be legitimate because their video looks so polished, right? Like, don't get me wrong, that's going to be it. But again, what is your goal, right? Like, is your goal to have a certain image, or is your goal to communicate a message, or is your goal to whatever, right? Like, it could be either. And if your goal is to communicate a message, then that polish might not be the thing that gets you that attention.
True.
Right? It could be the story. It could be, like, I always think about this RBC commercial that aired probably within the last couple of years.
Okay.
We're talking broadcast television, right? Which is very expensive video production. All they did was, as far as I can tell, got a bunch of homeowners to record them stepping into their first house that they ever bought.
Okay.
And they just stitched together a bunch of cell phone video and put some nice music to it, and says, like, we want to help you buy your first house. I can't remember what the message was. But it was so emotional.
Yep.
It was a great concept. It was real. It was raw. And it really got... But it didn't have that professional gloss on it or whatever, but that's because the concept and the idea was just so good, right? So yeah, if you're trying to portray like that you guys are a big deal and you are a professional corporation company, yeah, there is sense in spending that money, right? But if your main goal is really again to communicate a message, that high-end gloss or whatever is not necessarily the answer, right? It might be more the concept, the idea, that's going to make you stand out.
That's great. I also like the fact that you chose a service industry because there's a bit of a deficiency that the service industry has that the product industry doesn't. A product shot is a very simple thing to put in front of somebody. But if you're in a service industry, and there's this, at least I consider it a well-known book by a guy named Harry Beckwith called Selling the Invisible, which is his description of services. They are invisible. Yeah. But yet you showed through the RBC example how if you pick the right moment, even though banking is like completely invisible, they found a way to tell what it was that came as an outcome that they enabled.
Yeah. Well, I mean, impact is such a powerful thing that I feel like a lot of companies are grabbing onto right now. Like, Indeed is doing the same thing right now. So Indeed, if you think about the traditional corporate video, Indeed could have been like, we post 1,000 jobs from 1 billion job boards every day, and you can da-da-da. And it's just like, that's like, okay, great, whatever.
Yawn.
But they're, like, I saw a really powerful commercial from them recently where it was like this woman was being passed up for a promotion. She's like in a meeting room and they're like, we give the promotion to da-da-da. It was one of her coworkers. And all the commercial said was like, this is not the first time that Jane has been passed up for the promotion. And then it flashes to her phone where she gets an interview request from Indeed. And it's like, but this will be the last time, And it's just like, wow, that's like, yeah, that is the outcome. That's the impact that this software is having on them, right? It's not about the feature set. It's not about the, the way they implement it. I mean, Indeed is I mean, the UI of Indeed is a little bit, rough to begin with, but the impact that they're having on the world is a very big deal, right?
Yeah.
And so that kind of storytelling is very, very powerful. And that could have been just as powerful with a low gloss video, to be honest, right?
And you've highlighted, I think, one thing that is one of the cardinal sins that when we look at corporate videos the way they used to be done compared to how that generation that, the Indeed commercials and most modern marketers are looking at it is we're finally getting it through our heads that the actual hero of the story isn't us. And we have to maybe rack our brains a little bit and come up in this conceptualizing stage with when our client can have their hero moment. But that's like, we should be really racking our brains to find those. And then if we take those to somebody who produces videos, they say, yeah, easy, we can do that. And that will be very impactful.
Yeah. And like, I went to this workshop. It was organized by where I was working at the time from this company called Global to Win. And they're all about demoing software. And they used to have this saying, which I'm sure is not original to them. I'm sure a lot of like presenters and salespeople and all this, they used to have this saying basically just called "so what," right? And it was basically used when you're demoing software. Always asking "so what." It's like, oh, we're Indeed and we can list a bunch of jobs. So what? You can search for your jobs and you can post for your jobs. So what? You can upload your resume. So what? Right? Until you get to a point where it's like, that's actually an impact.
You can be Jane and feel that finally you're going to be
your life.
Appreciated.
Yeah.
Yeah. So There you go. There's your so what. But it was a few levels deep.
Yeah. And don't forget, this comes back to what you kind of mentioned, which is what your goal is, right? Like, I think Indeed at that point is like awareness, right? Their goal is like to really get known. So they tell a powerful story, right? I mean, it would be a very different video if they were seeking investment from VCs.
Or taking the person who's just signed up for an account and giving them instructions on how to upload the resume.
Exactly, right? That you can't just tell a random story about someone who got passed for promotion. Like, what? I can't use this, right? So yeah, it very much is, what your goal is. And I'll tell you, like, the number one thing that sticks out in my head as the mistake that people make when they go across video is video seems to be this thing, and rightfully so because it's expensive, that a lot of companies don't spend a lot of time, effort, and money on, and usually becomes a very last minute thought. So it's like we're a small to medium company, so we don't have that much money for marketing, and even within marketing, we have an even smaller budget for video, if any. And so when they finally decide we're going to make a video, okay, a lot of times they treat that as this is the only video we've made in the last 5 years, and it's the only video we're going to make within the next 10 years. Yeah. So we better put as much stuff as we can in there,
right?
And because this is our one chance to do that. And then it just becomes a muddled mess of a asset, right? It's
bundled up hopes and it has an impossible goal to accomplish.
Exactly. You're just like, let's attack every audience, let's attack every goal. Like coming back to the video strategy thing, hopefully a video strategy is within a marketing strategy that says, okay, we are going to be releasing, a video every 6 months or every year, and thinking about long term versus we're going to produce a video every 5 years and not really think about it and just try to cram everything into that video, right?
I couldn't agree more. And what it should end up being is that the ways that you are producing content in general go like a drum beat, and you just don't skip a beat.
Yeah.
And that video is inserted in a few of those where it makes sense, but then you're going back to text, or you're going to, you're just using different formats where it makes sense.
Exactly.
Couldn't agree more. Let's jump from conceptualizing to actually, let's call it pre-production.
Sure.
I guess some of the things here, and let's maybe talk about a video that does require a little bit of forethought. It's maybe a few minutes long, not just simply shot on your phone. What steps do you can encourage people to do if they're trying to write out something of a basic script, or they even have an idea of what I'll call blocking, where they're thinking, okay, I don't know quite what order this is going to happen here, but I need a scene where it's a few people, and then I need a scene where it's just one person talking, and then I need a scene where we just finish with what we're going to ask the person to do at the end of the video.
Right.
So how do you
sure
encourage people to do that?
Yeah, and I should preface this with, the majority of what we do kind of lands in the corporate video space. So we're talking explainers, testimonials, interviews, like that kind of stuff. We have done a couple of scripted narrative works that are a bit more something like you see on broadcast TV for, like that Indeed commercial.
Yep.
But a lot of what we do is someone talking to camera, say like, hi, I'm Glenn Schmelsley, and welcome to this video. We're going to da-da-da. So after we've kind of signed a contract with a client and they've given us a rough idea of what they're going after, we have the kickoff concept meeting. And in our kickoff concept meeting, we always request a whiteboard. I'm a huge fan of whiteboards for putting everybody on the same page, because I think everyone talking and letting ideas flow and stuff like that is a great thing, but it can lead to a lot of confusion. So that kickoff concept meeting is literally on the whiteboard, and you generally need a pretty good facilitator of this. So we, someone from our staff usually is a facilitator. And we are working with the client to just get a skeleton of what the video is going to look like, right? So that's basically just a high-level plan, no specific words, no specific script, just a high level of how we see the video going. And this lends itself particularly well to corporate video, because corporate video is really just kind of like a blog post. It's like, these 5 sections, we're going to hit these things, we're going to have a call to action at the end, a little introduction in the beginning. These are the main points we want to hit. And that's really all it is. It's just an outline. I'm very much a big fan of a hierarchical approach of like starting very broad and kind of going into the details after. So it's just getting on the whiteboard like a rough vision of how this video would play out from beginning to end. So sometimes what that looks like is, okay, we're going to have somebody who's going to introduce the problem statement. We're going to have then that person talk about the solution. Then we're going to highlight these 3 key points about our software or our service or our product or whatever. And then at the very end, we're going to say, visit our website for more information, something like that. It's usually about an hour long, and we can usually get through it in that hour. Some are a bit more complicated. Like sometimes it is a very complex topic to cover, but again, we're talking about getting this down to a minute or 2 minute long video.
Yep.
So we should be able to get that down in 1 hour, right? And we'd ask, we play our own devil's advocate and say, have we missed anything? Can we cut anything out? And a lot of it is cutting things out. A lot of things, yeah. Like we encourage the client to put as much as they can onto the whiteboard.
Yep.
And then we scale it back. Like, we don't want to limit either.
Sure.
Like, you don't want to say, like, don't mention anything. Like, whatever you guys say, because it's our job a little bit to be the experts on what would work and what wouldn't work, right?
Yep.
So we just tell the client, just throw out your ideas. Like, what is it that you want to say in this? What do you want to say in this? What do you want to say in this, right? And then we kind of scale it back. Like, do we really need this in the video? Do we really need this in the video?
So let's talk a little bit about if we get into production and where video's a little bit different from, let's say, your standard outline is we used to, and I remember back in high school plays, we had this more of a table, and the big part of the table would be, here's what's being said, but then you might have a few more columns, and it would have been like house lights and whether the stage curtains are open or closed.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's things similar to that in video where, and these might just be scribble notes for now, but tell me, like, what sorts of things does somebody who has an eye for video production, what are they putting beside the message that is helping them understand how they might, when it comes to production day, how they might actually run it?
Yeah, so, what's interesting is, like, if you get into, you're a massive company and you have a lot of marketing spend and you have the budgets for like Hollywood level kind of productions, there is a whole process behind that, right? You start with a script with kind of general stage direction that says like, this person's going to say this, and when they say this, they're going to sit down on the couch and then this and that.
Okay.
But then what ends up happening after that is a director gets that script, and it's the director's job to really figure out all that stuff, the blocking, the shots, all that stuff, right?
Yep.
On smaller scale stuff like kind of what we do, it doesn't really matter how you do it. What matters is that you've done it, that you've given some thought to what might visually be on screen, right? So What we do, and a lot of people do this, is just literally having a 2-column table where you have the script on the left and you have visual directions on the right? So
what would some of those look like? Like the main thing I kind of get nervous about when I visualize that is that if I said there's going to be one camera shot of that it would be awfully boring to go through this line after line after line of somebody saying something, and there's just one shot. So I guess part of it is, all right, that's too long. If there's 2 people talking here, maybe we add a second camera, and in editing, we'll flip back and forth between the people that are talking.
Yeah. If you're a marketer who's going to be working with a video production company, then the only thing that you really have to communicate, if at all, is any kind of particulars that you want to see, right? Okay. So, for example, they could be as simple as one sentence, like shot of the phone, like shot of the app on the phone, the person clicks this button, right? Because you're trying to emphasize, I want to show the user interface of this app, and I want to make sure that shows up on screen. In that, us as film producers, we know that shot might really be 5 shots. Right, we know someone pulling out their phone is a close-up of their hand pulling out the phone, and the phone comes in the screen, and then there's a close-up of the button. And even when they're pressing the button, we zoom right in on the button itself.
Oh wow!
That kind of comes out because that's where our expertise lies.
But you're inferring that from just the one line shot of phone, and you're figuring out, well, there's voiceover happening while, right? But
exactly, and it's kind of our job as video producers, like especially if we're working with someone who's not experienced in video production, to keep it interesting, to make that right. And that's where there's really an open conversation, right? I mean, most of our clients just trust us. We're going to shoot it the way we.
But you have to be told enough information so that you can fill in all those blanks. Right.
And a lot of times it's just like, what is crucial to you guys, right? And if there's nothing really crucial besides the messaging, and we're hitting that, then you don't need any visual notes sometimes, right? Sometimes it's like, here's the voiceover, here's the general shots that we want. And again, they can be very simple. They can be like a shot of the person getting out of the truck, a shot of the person walking up to the building, that's it. And again, that may encompass 5 shots or whatever, right?
Sure.
Like the classic joke in like Hollywood style filmmaking is that a scriptwriter will write one line and a fight breaks out. And that's one line on the script, but that's like days of shooting and like weeks of coordination, things like that.
Yes.
So my thing is that if you're working with a video production company, it's just about communicating, are there any crucial things that you need to see on screen? And beyond that, work with the production company. They will tell you what you need. If the budget's big enough, they'll do storyboards and pre-visualization and stuff like where they'll Like sometimes what we'll do is we'll do storyboards and we will animate, not fully animate the storyboards, but just edit them together with music.
Yep.
We did this with App 8. And they could see all the shots, right? That pulling it out and stuff like that. And so, if there's something missing, you'll catch it in the storyboard phase.
Or how you guys have seen it doesn't necessarily reflect the flow.
Yeah.
Right. So this is where, again, that translation between the marketer and the video producer, it's, they're starting to work together well, because while each of them doesn't have to know completely what the other does, they can at least have this common language.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And when you guys take that over, I gather production is done, as you said, there can be 5 days if it's a fight, but when you are showing up, if it's the case of it's outsourced, your aim is to kind of move checklist style through the things that were in that right-hand column and get them all.
Yep.
And the idea is you want to get them all and you don't want to have to come back, right?
Correct.
So that's, again, something that I've heard you say, but I'm just underlining it, where you say, what, Mr. or Mrs. Marketer, were the important things that you wanted us to cover? Because the other thing that you're saying in that is, when we're done shooting and we're packing up our gear, we don't plan to come back.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is the thing. Pre-production and post-production are usually, anywhere between 2 to 6 weeks, and production, which is for those who don't know, pre-production is basically all the planning leading up to a shoot. Production itself is the shoot, and post-production is everything after the shoot.
Yeah.
Production itself, for the most part, a lot of times is a day or two, and everything else leading up to it can be a couple of weeks. And the whole reason is that production, a lot of times, a lot of things have to line up. The people that you're getting involved to shoot, any extra crew, your equipment, the weather has to be right, booking of the location, all this stuff has to line up really well. And it's really hard if any one of those things fails, right? So, for example, what a lot of people don't realize is, we'll sometimes get an email that's like, oh, Casey, something happened today. Can we move it to tomorrow, right? Okay, my analogy is a wedding. So if you are the bride and groom, and somebody messages you and says, hey, Casey, I just asked the date to come. Can you squeeze them into the seating chart? On their side, it looks like, oh, that's super simple. Yeah. But if you're the bride and groom, you're like, no, I got to relay that to the hotel.
It's a world of hurt.
It's crazy, right? And a lot of productions can be that way. Even the seemingly smallest productions.
Sure.
You're renting gear, you're booking location, all this stuff has to line up, right? So a lot of pre-production, a lot of that stuff, it gets very expensive if you catch it late in the process, right? So if you forgot, oh, Casey, there's one more shot we want to get of that. Can we do that? That might be an hour or two just to squeeze that shot in. It may not be.
Right.
And to be honest, it would be unfair for video production companies to expect the people they're working with to know that. So they should never blame you for asking.
Yeah.
They should really never blame you for asking. It doesn't hurt to ask. But be very prepared that video production company might say, like, that's going to be a big headache to do.
Let's maybe talk about something where we go into post-production. Mm-hmm. And this is a chance where if some of that little, chance of success is to be maximized, I gather a good video production shop can use post-production for that. Maybe you could just tell us, for people on the outside, what are the sorts of things that you're doing, or what might we be able to help you with, if any, on the post-production side to move from all of that raw footage to the final product?
Yeah, so if you are talking a scripted piece of work, you've probably done your job by that point.
Yeah.
Because you've helped us craft the message, you've helped us craft the script, you've reviewed the storyboards. Really after pre-production, it just becomes executing, and there's not a lot to do after that. And to be honest, you don't even have a lot of room for revisions at that point, because it's like, if you want a new shot, it's like, well, we only shot what we intended to shoot, right? So for scripted works where you're literally writing a script and you have a narrative and you have actors and all this stuff like that, to be honest, you probably won't get involved that much. I mean, at most, you might be talking about the music that was selected, things like that.
What about the more casual?
Yeah, so we're talking about like testimonial stuff, those kind of things. So, again, I would say probably 75% of your work is done by that point because you have talked to us about your message and what you're trying to get across, these kind of things. But really what happens at that point is we are combing through the footage and we're trying to get the best parts that, get your message across. The best piece of advice, to be honest, I have at that point is if you were on set and you were part of the interview, like you were just overseeing the interview and you heard stuff and you remember stuff that we weren't using in the cut that you thought would be better, it's just like, don't be afraid to ask, basically.
Sure.
Don't be afraid to say like, hey, Casey, I think, this is good, but I remember this part that he said that was like so much better at expressing that. Or don't be afraid to ask like, is there a better clip we can use? Because I don't like how he's scratching his lip at this point or whatever. These kind of things, right? We do our best to pick the best shots and the best phrases and stuff.
If there's some cutaway to something else, that might be the moment to do it.
Yeah.
They're continuing with a nice voiceover and nobody notices, and then you return to them to the headshot. Very true. I think that the other thing that I'll just say from noticing how production and post-production work together is you guys do have the ability to time travel. And what I mean by that is, this is so silly to admit, but, I was amazed the first time I saw footage being put together in edit that was not in the order that it was shot in.
Yeah.
So somebody is saying something, and that's a good point, but they said it at the very end of the, shooting that you did, and you put that right at the front. Why not?
Yeah.
So you're playing with time. The final person watching this video has no clue what order things were shot in. It doesn't matter.
That's the thing. It's an interesting thing actually that comes from I probably like the better Hollywood documentary filmmakers. I say Hollywood, but I mean like the big time people. Sometimes they find a different story. You end up interviewing and something's not working, and then you're like, what if we told the story a little different? What if we moved? What if we shifted? What if we played around with the audience's perception? All these kind of things, right? Like there are little versions of that we do that people don't realize. Like sometimes we can make someone sound a lot more eloquent than they are. We'll cut out a lot of ums and uhs and hesitations and all that kind of stuff, right? There's a lot of masking of that because it does sound awkward. Like when you see a polished testimonial video, there's a lot of subtle work that's being done there that you don't notice in the final edit. And that's a good thing. It's a good thing that you don't notice that we've done something to their answers or whatever, right?
And it's not deceiving. The example where I've seen it used is if the testimonial is done, the camera's just on the client. And let's say there's an off-camera person like the marketer who's interviewing them. What you'll do in post is you will take the answers that the client gave and you might insert part of what they were saying because it is so succinct into a part of their testimonial which really was answering a different question than the marketer asked.
Yeah.
Right? And it doesn't matter. The point is that there's a flow to their talking and that it seemed to make the most sense there for them to say it.
Yeah. And that's our challenge as editors, to be honest, when it comes to editing things like testimonial videos, where sometimes when you're picking the clips that you want to use, it's not just about the best content. Unfortunately, sometimes we're restricted by the best flow or the best way to tell the story, right? Like if we are trying to put two clips side by side of one answer versus another answer, even though it might not be the best answer, it may be the best flow to actually make this seem like, a seamless 30-second to go through the entire thing. So we're restricted a little bit by that, right? And it's finding that balance between what they're saying and what will work for the video, right?
Really? Okay, so this might be down to how they ended the sentence on
exactly.
the top or on it
100%. That's one of the ones we struggle with a lot. It's like, oh, that's a perfect answer, but it sounds like they're about to say something else, and what they end up saying something else has nothing to do with what we're talking about. Right.
So we would go with the other clip at that stage.
Exactly. Right. So yeah, it's a lot of, but to be honest, that's the fun part of our job too. It's like when we can figure that out.
You guys are time travelers, like I said.
Yeah, and
magicians and time travelers.
Yeah, exactly. And when we can craft that, it's an awesome feeling when it all comes together. To be honest, so
yeah, it is, and it shows. That takes us to the end of talking about how videos can be created. And I have to say, Casey, you have demystified it. You really brought out the apprehension in there. It doesn't seem so big and foreboding as me and many marketers make it out to be. So I do want to ask you, for the marketer who's willing to tread into maybe helping themselves understand a little bit more about this, are there any resources or places that you can send them to just help to understand any part of what you've been talking about today? Any place, or where would you suggest somebody starts?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I would concentrate a lot on educating yourself on post-production. Here's why. Because if you're a marketer, you're probably really good at a lot of the stuff we do in pre-production, which is finding your message, crafting your message, telling a story. Like if you write a blog post, you're crafting a message, you're highlighting the best parts, those kind of things, right? So you're probably really good at that already. Now there's some, education to be translated into how does that translate into film, but to be honest, being a marketer, you're probably better than a lot of people already at that pre-production phase, right? When you're getting started, your pre-production is probably not going to involve location scouting and renting gear and all that stuff like that, because your production phase, if you're just starting out, is probably going to be you on your iPhone or your smartphone just holding it out in front of you and recording yourself. And so your production phase, you don't have to educate yourself that much on either. You just kind of hold up your phone and record yourself. So where I recommend that you can educate yourself a lot on is post-production. So learning how to edit, learning how to add some titles, learning how to add some music, these kind of things, right?
Okay.
And concrete resources, I don't really have any. I just say like YouTube.
Sure.
YouTube is a wealth of information. There's a billion videos on how to edit.
Well,
right?
And there's a step behind even on YouTube, and I've been using this. It's not only a full-fledged video hosting platform, it has video editing inside of it.
Yeah.
I can use the director, and I can always set those videos to private.
Yeah.
So that nobody ever dares see them. But it allows you to, just like you said, the titling, a little bit of moving clips around, transitions, just mucking around.
Yeah.
You can start to get the idea, and then that helps you when you need to go to a video production company and you hear them saying terms or just having an idea of what's going to come next and not being so spooked out by what the process is.
Yeah. Video production is one of these skills that I believe very strongly is like learning an instrument, right? Which is you're just going to get better by doing it. The biggest advice I have to anyone who wants to get into video production is just start doing it. You don't have to publish stuff. You don't have, like you said, you can put it on private, but just like getting used to, setting up a camera and recording something, right? Like literally go to a park and record leaves falling off a tree or something, right? And you learn so much. Like there was a student who asked me recently, I want to get into video production. What should I do? I was like, you know what? Set yourself a goal by the end of next week that you've recorded yourself. You don't have to publish it. You don't have to do any of that. Just record yourself, because you're going to learn so much. You're going to learn like what it's like when you're looking in the wrong direction of the lens, what it's like, how long it takes you to speak in front of camera, what your audio going to sound like, what your composition. You're going to learn like a billion things just by watching the video that you've recorded, right? And you won't really, that knowledge won't sink in just by watching somebody else tell you how to frame or how to record or whatever. When you do it yourself, you just pick up these things over and over again, right? Yeah. So that's my biggest advice to people who want to get into video production. Like, again, I want to be very clear that a lot of the stuff that I've talked about today, you don't have to do that. Like, you don't don't think that to get a good video production, you need a shot list, you need blocking, you need lighting, you need all this stuff. You really, really, really don't. Phones are incredible today. Like, for sure. Like, the iPhone 11 Pro is like beating out a lot of high-end cameras, So like if you don't get me wrong, it's a $2,000 phone.
Right, and you can always go higher in gear. But the point is, we've reached minimum threshold that allows any one of us to be a video content creator.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And the only way you'll get better at it is just by doing it. You'll pick up your own techniques. And that's why YouTube is so incredible. Like YouTube has like kind of democratized video production and has given a voice to people who don't make videos the traditional way and has taken over. Like YouTube, for example, has really popularized the jump cut. If you don't know what the jump cut is, you can Google it. But But now, like corporate video, like us ourselves, we use jump cuts because people on YouTube are using them.
Yeah.
Right? So it's these people who have not been trained in video. Yep. They just created their own style, and now it's become a style of its own to like edit that way, right?
Yep.
So
and that authenticity. I mean, you wouldn't have said 20 years ago that a shaky, phone camera type of shot is acceptable, except many people now consider that to be their way of understanding that the person who's just made that is being themselves.
Oh.
So that now actually, in a weird way, makes the high polished stuff look suspect. And well, what are you trying to sell me? So, right, we have, I love your word democratized. It really has taken it that way. And it's now made it so that we as marketers, we have a little excuse, but to explore what the medium is. Like you said, we might do a few of them. I also take solace in the fact that the first couple that you do, even if you post them, probably not going to get that many people looking at them, which is what you want. That's when you're going to figure out, get the bugs out, get it better, so that when you really are working with, let's say, a good sized budget, you're ready and it can go in front of a primetime audience, so to speak.
Yeah.
And then you're really accomplishing stuff with video, but it does take those baby steps to get there.
I mean, I'm a big subscriber to the MVP model of software, which basically talks about getting a minimum version out so that people give you feedback. And video should be no different. Like, get a video out there and try to figure out why people are or not watching it, And you may be surprised. Like, they might be like, I don't watch this because I don't like the sound of your voice. Okay, can't change that. But it might be like, I don't watch this because like you take too long to get to the point. And then it's like, okay, well, I'll change that, right? You'd be surprised that maybe a lot of people, maybe no one ever says, I don't watch this because the quality sucks or because the production value is low. Like, maybe no one says that, and then you don't have to invest that time and money into that. Right?
And yet that's the number one hang-up that most of us would give for why we're not going to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're right. We just should flatten that and bust that myth and go ahead and do it anyway.
Yeah.
I'm going to consider, what you gave in those last few minutes there as a bunch of different ways to reboot our funnel, whether it's shooting ourselves on video at a park or going onto YouTube and watching how things can be done and deconstructing it. Those are all great. What's the best way for people if they want to get in touch with you, Casey?
You can go to our website, bitesite.ca. We did not get the .com. We were late on that one. Bitesite.ca, although we are proudly Canadian.
And site is SITE.
Correct.
Okay, I'll put that in the show notes.
Yeah, yeah. Go to that. Reach out to us. You can email us at info@bitesite.ca. My email address is kicking around too. Feel free to email me personally if you want to.
All right. Very cool, Casey. I'm really thankful that you came on today. And to the listener, I'm glad that you listened hopefully all the way to the end and caught so much of the advice that Casey has on this. And I want to hear any feedback that you have. So please feel free to share it. If you're on Twitter, go ahead and hit me up on Funnel Reboot or at HeyGlennS, or visit the website and just give us contacts of what you liked, or feel free to write us a review on Apple Podcasts. But I want to thank you again for listening.
Thanks for listening. Follow the show on Twitter at Funnel Reboot. If you like what you have heard today, please consider leaving a review wherever you get your podcasts.